Well, thanks, Aaron and Martin, for joining me today. Really excited to chat, man, and talk about WYDE and the impact exchange and everything tokenizations might be able to offer to nonprofits and what perhaps this future looks like with tokenizations and crypto and all the words we hear that are sometimes have a negative connotation to it. But I wanted to do this because there's a lot of positive that can come from decentralization and blockchain, the technology itself. And so I really want to dig into all that. But before we get started on this sort of awesome idea and just journey you guys are both taking together, I guess talk about your career journeys before this. Talk about that career path for both of you. Aaron, you want to go first, and then we'll get into Martin.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Grant. Thanks for having us on. You know, that was a quick turnaround after we reached out. So it's always good to see you clearly got what we were talking about. We want to, not everyone gets it. And I think talking with the right people about what we're doing, that's what takes this beyond crypto
Hmm.
and actually for the meaningful impact that we know that it can have and actually that blockchain can have. Bit about me, background, actually, my first career was in research, behavioral science, where the big thing that I always wanted to do was ever since I was a kid, I just wanted to help people, and in a way that I didn't want to be, the savior for any person or like the dependence of that person needing me to actually make their life better. I wanted to help people help themselves. And that was like that's always been my thing. How can I help you be a better you? And so in the research side of things, I learned that there's lots of problems in the world, food insecurity. There's a lot of people that are actually like even in America, the wealthiest
Oh yeah.
country in history, there's a lot of poor people. And, this is a huge problem and something that, I've seen and experienced. And in that line of career, I found that technology was the best thing to break that gap. Technology and, my first real break into the AI and technology space was actually in a review and research that I did to see how AI actually affected the impacts and outcomes for individuals that had IBS. It was an AI app. Really, they are still around, but that was back in 2018, 2019. They were using AI to help people help themselves, basically cure themselves of IBS. But back then, it was very cutting edge, and so this was when I found that there was no research in that space. I loved that. There was nothing on the impact of technology for health and nutrition, and so that was something that I always found that I wanted to do. And then I also found that there needs to be more people that are actually making a difference and an impact as entrepreneurs, and that was a much faster way to go. And so that's where I went, and then obviously met Martin, and I'll let Martin talk about his back.
Yeah, yeah, and again, thanks, Grant, for having us on. I definitely have a different path. I think that's one of the reasons Aaron and I kind of came together. I more started in the finance world. So two publicly traded companies. Actually, was CFO of one at a very young age, and really there, right? It's all about understanding strategy, structure, and people. And doing so in a very structured and sustainable manner. And so, like, I've really been pulling levers to grow the initiatives of corporates. But while I was there, I really went into the people aspect, right? And understanding internally and externally, how do you actually bring about more impact to your internal employees, right? To the clients that we're serving, right? Really, if you think about the biggest companies in the world right now that are doing that well, like Apple, right? They do a really good job of treating their internal employees good, and also on the flip side, right, thinking about what the client wants in a really reasonable way. And so for me, like that path, one of the things is fiduciary duty. You
Hmm.
have a fiduciary duty to your shareholder, and that's something that you literally learn in college, right? When you're getting your finance degree. Very interesting concept, right? If you look back to the 80s, it's a newer concept that really was constructed then. And if you think about what that means, you know, they're teaching me to do things for profit. And to be honest, right, there was a lot of friction, I would say, during my corporate upbringing on what that actually meant and how to do that in a way that balanced, right, people and impact and profit, right, in a very sustainable manner. And so for me, right, I think a part of what you're going to hear today is the ideation of how you kind of rethink the entire model of fiduciary duty. And still, right, we're driving towards obviously value, and that's we're not doing away with that from a investor ROI perspective. Like that's not what we're trying to do away with. However, we're trying to create a model where you are incentivized to actually impact people and incentivized to do so in a very sustainable manner where truly it's not, we're just laying off to get to a number, for example, right?
Mhm.
It's
Yep.
truly a situation where the decisions that we're making it because it is to the betterment of the organization or, the cause. And so, that's one. I think my other why, when I was younger, probably around I think 7 years old, my mom had breast cancer. She's still alive, right? Which is great. It was very you're a kid and you're literally your mom and dad are telling you, hey, you this is something that is untreatable potentially. And you're like, what? Like why is that? What is that? Right? You have all these questions. And so I think a part of my upbringing was really like, what are these problems in the world that are impossible to solve? I'm definitely a puzzle guy, right? I get a puzzle every Christmas still to this day. And that's just what really, really gets me going. And so, like, I look at, some of the things that are impossible to solve. And those are the things that it just gets me up right in the morning on like,
Yep.
okay, if I know where my next meal is, right? For example, but why is it that 47 million Americans actually don't, right? And we live in the richest, country in America. And how can you actually solve that? And if it's just money, right? Then how do we quantify that? And then
Yeah.
what would that mean? And you see the numbers, right? 100 billion of investment in AI, 500 billion right here and there. Like it's nothing. And the reality is, right, you kind of question like, is there a world where some of that could get directed to actually solve some of these huge problems that we have that we're facing?
We're gonna try to get into now a little bit about what you guys are building. Let's talk like the highest level. Let's just talk about what WYDE is, the impact exchange, the overarching sort of idea and its sort of mission and vision, and what let's go as basic as we can, and then we'll kind of dig into a little bit more of the details.
Yeah, so with everything for us, we've together in the past 5 years, we've built businesses, we've done a lot, and it really what we found is that we have a superpower, and that is to get the attention of the right people at the right time. And I would say there's certain things that have unlocked, specifically in the last, year or 2 years, that have enabled WYDE. One of them that has always been a barrier in crypto, blockchain, et cetera, is actually the adoption of people. And what's that actually mean? Like, I don't want to hold private keys. I don't want to have to sign up a hot wallet and then, lose my funds if I don't have this piece of paper.
Yeah.
And that's me. There's a lot of people that don't even know what I just said.
Yes.
And
Yes.
they just want to have a Coinbase account. If they don't have that Coinbase account, they're not going to participate in this whole thing. And so there's a lot of things that have happened that have enabled people to come on board. And so with those, we've kind of reorganized our thoughts around what that means. And so Wyoming Decentralized Exchange was actually the way to go. And a lot of people ask us like, why Wyoming? And what I say to them is, why NYSE? Why New York Stock Exchange? Like Wyoming is actually, if for those that don't know, it's the first place that launched the LLC, which obviously limited liability protection for a company, and it made it very easy for anyone to go into business. And then all the states adopted it.
Yep.
And so they also have been the first to bring forward laws and regulations around how a group of people can operate in a decentralized way and limit their liability and risk from one bad party in that group, right? And so that's what we've actually brought in. And so wide, which obviously that is our iteration on how do you actually work in a decentralized way? If you're going to do that, what should you be doing? And so wide itself is actually built for impacting people. Um, if crypto is a technology, that's really all it is. What should that technology enable? It's immutable, and it's obviously it enables people to operate permissionlessly, build permissionlessly. And so with Wide, we are launching effectively organizations that anyone can join and impact people. And that's a big thesis for us.
I think for people that are just trying to understand the mechanics of it at a high level, today you trade stock, right, with Schwab. And when you trade that Schwab stock, maybe it's, Apple stock, someone is actually getting a fee on that generally, right? Obviously there's some models where it's a free fee model, but really that's not correct, right? There's always a maker taker fee. And so what we've done though is we've effectively created the solution where those fees that everyone would be accustomed to are now directed towards causes and initiatives. And even more important to that is the people that are trading the assets. So, if you're trading Apple, right, for example, you are now in a community where you have member controlled rights over the direction of those funds, right, in a meaningful way. And so that is something that, blockchain enables because it inherently is a ledger that is transparent and automatically is able to direct funds wherever you want. But that's the biggest novelty, right, of mechanism itself. I think for us, right, like we understand this is a walk before you run for sure. I think if you look at most innovations from 1900 to now, medical or technology, right? It's messy until it's not, right?
Mhm.
And I think our mindset is that, with that, the nice thing is there's a lot of just foundational elements over the last, I would say, 10 years that have happened where some of that has enabled us to be where we are today. But yeah, in a nutshell, these are communities that you trade into member control, right? The cause initiative, like let's say it's hunger. And then those fees get actually directed to hunger, cancer, right? Fill in the blank. We're going to be launching several from launch here.
So try to crystallize it a little bit. We have Kraken is an exchange. Coinbase is an exchange. There's a plethora of crypto exchanges, dozens, probably hundreds, right? So is Wide building a similar exchange where, a user can create their own wallet or just if they have a wallet, import their wallet, trade, whether it's ETH, Solana, meme coins, Doge, whatever it might be, can they trade that on Wide and then those trading fees go to a specific cause? Or is it the tokens or tickers on Wide Exchange, specifically cause related tickers
Yep.
to be
Yep.
traded? I guess that it's a lot
Yeah.
here. Again, I'm trying to crystallize it a little bit because we're so early on in the platform, but
For sure. Yeah, no. At this point, there's specific tickers. So we will have a specific end hunger token. We'll have a specific, cure cancer token. There will be specific
okay.
initiatives, and right now, right, I would say it's super important to start there because we think about energy towards initiatives a lot, and if you dilute the cause at this juncture, it feels like a novelty, right? Like, let's say that, you did this with Dogecoin today and you said, oh, we're now going to direct a portion to cancer. Great. It's actually great. Like we would love that to
Yep.
happen. I think eventually, we're going to look at, seeing what that looks like. However, it can't stop there, right? Like there actually has to be strategy, structure, and people that are dedicated towards actually solving the initiatives of these campaigns. And so if you don't actually have specificity towards those obligations, really, you can't actually drive the right attention to that cause to make meaningful impact.
Do you want to give an example?
So I think there's a couple things too that are important. So we're talking to a lot of nonprofits right now, and
Yeah.
they always have similar questions. And one of those is, what is the connection between this token and their organization?
Yeah.
And really, at this juncture, it's really easy to understand because there's no true connection, right? It's a partnership. They're a beneficiary of, and there's a reason why we're doing that, right? And that is because these members that are controlling the actual funds, they don't have any voting power over the actual nonprofit, right? There needs to be clean dissection around that. I do think eventually that could happen, right? Where you could have a situation where the actual nonprofit wants to structure their own, and right, it's their community, and there's a lot there. But to answer like more of what you're trying to get at there, what happens is we will partner, Intunger will partner with a nonprofit. The trading fees, let's say it trades $1 million
You're
and
saying end hunger is the token.
correct. Yeah.
You're saying. Okay.
Yeah. End Hunger, the ticker name is going to be EAT. It actually launches on December 10th. That's our first
Okay.
initiative. And so,
And we
right,
should say my apologies, I'm trying to take it step by step. We should say that Eat Hunger is itself a Duna structure?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Let's explain really quickly what the Wyoming Duna structure is, and then we'll kinda go down that path from there. And I
Yeah.
think that'll help us understand the stack and layered of everything.
Yeah, so Wyoming Decentralized Exchange itself is a DUNA structure. So it is a nonprofit, but at the same time, every single specific token that we launch on Wyoming Decentralized Exchange is also its own nonprofit and its own organization. And so when we launch End Hunger Eat token on December 10th, that will trade. And as it trades, we will collect fees where those fees will actually get funded to a beneficiary that we've selected. And so there's several that we're engaged with right now.
Gotcha.
I do think the model today potentially looks different than the model in the future, but how we're thinking about that today is it's basically year obligations where we will be committed to the nonprofit beneficiary for a minimum of a year. And at which point, after that year, the token holders can actually vote on potentially trading out that beneficiary, trading out that nonprofit. And obviously, right, it's all about right the relationship between that nonprofit and the members. If they're doing a great job and they're showing that the funding that we're providing actually is doing something in the real world, I think that, they'll probably keep their seat. If they don't, I think we would actually go to market and try to identify other nonprofits that actually can do the same thing. I think what's super important is, we do what we do really well, which is attention, technology, really creating more opportunities for nonprofits. At this point, we don't have the operational, right, strategy structure people to be boots on the ground, doing the same things that these nonprofits are doing.
Yeah,
And so
sure.
that's where, right, it's really important because a lot of, right, people, they get so consumed with having to do everything, but there's a lot of really good people doing a lot of good things, these nonprofits that we can align with, that we can, provide horsepower to and effectively own the outcomes, right, of what they're actually doing. And so really like that is the agenda today. I do think 3 years, right, that potentially looks different, right? We now have more people, you have more members, more traders, more community, where now you can really start to rethink, okay, well, is it going to a nonprofit or is a nonprofit, really, are we connecting the dot in more of a strategic partnership? Or is it like our community really that's following suit there? Do we have the structure, people, right, to actually go boots on the ground and start to really drive impact directly?
So right now, End Hunger, which is just as a Duna, it'll be the EAT token. That EAT token, as people buy it, trade it, that trading then the fees from that trading go to a selected organization that you guys have made. At its
100%.
simplest level, that's sort of what it is, correct?
That's
If you
it.
hold the EAT token, you then have some right to eventually say, "Hey, let's keep the trading fees with this organization, but maybe after 12 months, there's another nonprofit partner that the Duna seeks out to become a recipient of those trading fees."
Exactly. Yeah. And
Okay.
I think the other thing that's really important in that is there's a reason why we're not launching 20 like from day one. And that is
Yep.
because, that is really because our job at this juncture in this, as well as like the community members, will be to hold these nonprofits accountable for the actual impact from the funds that we're delivering. Right. And so if you think about what that looks like, we have to really dig into what are the driving KPIs that are meaningful? How are we actually verifying, right, with transparency that the impact actually did what it needs to do. And so there's a lot of work to be done there, right? And so we're going to be really working hand in hand with all these nonprofits in a very synergistic manner. But as we find more of that, I'm sure that is where we'll be able to scale. But I think it's really important to say that because a lot of teams right now are doing something adjacent, right? Or they're ideating it, but then that's just crypto, right? Then it's just another crypto project that is not actually driving towards tangible outcomes and not actually doing it with substance, right? In the real world. Like we come from very real world upbringings, right? It's not like this Fugazi thing. And so Work is work. Like you have to go to work. Like we're not just looking at the numbers on this. We're looking at actually right people and what we're actually doing in a meaningful way.
Obviously, you're talking to a lot of nonprofits. What's the conversations like with them? What is the ask to them? Because from what I could tell, like, you could just do this and then just give the money to give the trading fees to them, and it just comes in as a normal donation, right? I
Yep.
guess so. What do you need, I guess, them for? Is that more of a, partnership? We can have the logos on the site where it's a little bit of a trust factor there. Is the conversations really with them getting on board as a partner more so than anything else?
Yeah, I think it goes to substance, right? Like I think that business is relationship. And you can't hide behind a screen to really conduct business in the way that we want to.
Mhm,
Um, you're absolutely right. Like we will be probably going to market with some tokens before having a partner on board, which we know is completely fine. With that said, a lot more sense, right? If we're doing it with a lot more clarity. A lot of these nonprofits, some of the questions that we're having between us is what does a dollar mean, right? Like, for some a dollar means
mhm.
it can feed four kids, but for some a dollar means it can feed two kids, right? That kind of thing. So these are really important things for us to understand so that when we're thinking about our models on the funds that are coming in, we actually are tangibly understanding what potential impact the dollars that are coming in can have. So that's like at the minimum. And then like past that, right, we're working with some more local food banks right now. I mean, those are, like in our backyard where we can literally go in, visit, and see what's happening, talk to the people, talk to the organization, right? And so again, I think I say this a lot, but like you have to walk before you run with a lot of this stuff. And we've built a lot of companies now. we have like 6 organizations, and so we understand how hard things are. Like things are. It's not easy to do anything. People that say, "Oh yeah, it's easy," like they've actually never built businesses truly, right? And there's a lot of like intentional and fluid energy and effort that you have to actually go into to make sure that things are getting done in the right manner.
Aaron, do you wanna add anything to that as far as your conversations with nonprofits or maybe what you've learned in speaking with them? What is their feedback, and maybe has that helped build the product perhaps better based on that market research with them?
Yeah. The the question is always, first of all, like, what's the risk? And obviously we talked through that, and,
Yeah,
the Dunas, they do a lot to understand what that actually is. But then it's, where's the money coming from? Like, that's a huge question. Like, people still don't
yeah,
get it. Even
good
people
question, yeah,
don't understand where the money comes from for most of crypto, right? You have a business types in blockchain today. You have actual blockchains that take a fee on every actual just operation that happens on the network,
yep,
whether it's a trade or a transaction, like everything, there's a fee associated to that. We are not a blockchain, right? Then there's actually the exchange of assets, and so like that's a big question for them. Where's the fee come from? Okay, have you seen Doge? Do you know what that is? Most people do. No, most people have heard of Dogecoin, and they actually don't know that Dogecoin trades about $2 billion
yep,
per day on the exchange. It's crazy. And if you take actually, if you just peel back the layers of that, you understand that there's decentralized exchange trading, and then there's actual centralized, which would be like Coinbase and things like that. We're more on the decentralized side, just FYI.
okay,
But with those fees, you have um 0.05%, 5 bips up to, some things are, especially like things like this, some things they're taking like 5% of the fee because it's going to a good place. And so if you just take 50 bips, right, half a percent on that $2 billion a day, it comes out to a really big number every day. And so for them, it's like, oh, there's
crazy.
a big number that could be directed towards the nonprofit. What do I have to do? Like, what do you need from us? And the answer really is like actually nothing. That's where the question around what can you what outcomes can you provide to us for every dollar that is distributed. But the more that they can do, obviously the better. And at this like early stage, we need the people that believe in this and aren't scared of, the narratives around crypto. They believe in like the core competency of the technology, which actually is
Mhm.
very robust, right? If you look at Bitcoin, that's why people love Bitcoin. It's immutable. The government can't print more of it. There's tangible value there. You have to actually expend energy to get Bitcoin out, right? So there's actual a real value transfer there. Nothing different, right? We're still operating in blockchain, but now there's actually real volume, like real dollars that are going through and real money that goes towards these nonprofits and these outcomes. And the other thing that they, actually get really well is if you have good outcomes, if it's feeding America, if you're
Mhm.
feeding people and you $1 goes towards feeding 10 people, you're gonna get more money to do that thing, right? That's like they have to hone their narrative and their rhetoric around what they actually do, and then they actually have to operate to get more money. And so we're no different. But the one thing that is really different is instead of this one-time donation that they have to go back and get every year or whatever that is, where they have to maintain this, now you have a perpetual source of funding. And that's something completely different that they've never had. It's actually like nonprofits don't have public markets, right? This is actually a public market for nonprofits, and that's when the light bulb goes off for some, and it becomes a really interesting conversation. Then you start exploring the potential of that, and then some of them they're saying, "Well, what if I just want to launch my own, and I don't want right?"
Mhm. Mhm.
And so that obviously that's down the
Yeah.
road, but not today.
Yeah, I'm starting to understand the idea more of it being just, hunger related or water related or education related. And then because I think that allows the token holder to, again, we can get into sort of some of the tokenomics around, if I own the E token, the governance I have is then what? Because that is sort of like with Doge is a lot of these other coins is not necessarily an asset that backs it, it's more like vibes. And with this, at least you have the ability, and obviously there's governance in every token, but with this, I guess, is the power in holding it. Let's just stay with the E coin, is that it sort of has that accountability factor where if this nonprofit does want to continue to receive this sort of reoccurring revenue, they have to obviously keep doing what they say they're gonna do. So there's a nice balance there of accountability. Because once I think they start to receive funds, whether it's monthly, quarterly, I'm not sure how that's going to be dispersed quite yet. But that's gonna, I imagine, entice them to keep obviously doing the good work and not arrive from the mission. So as each token holder, they have governance like that within the E token.
Yeah. So there's a lot. There's a lot here to actually unpack. So yes, each person has governance. I do think again, walk before you run mentality. Um, we about 3 years ago, we were big on this founderless DAO narrative. We were one of the ones that were, really saying that this is the way to go forward. I'm thinking about like Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin, there's no founder behind Bitcoin. Because of that, there's also a lot of trust. And so that is where each of these tokens will be. I think today, obviously, we're talking here and we're, founding them, but like from a tokenomics perspective, we're not taking right anything from Eat Hunger token personally at all, right?
Mhm.
That is all. It's all a fair launch. It goes to the market, right? If we want to actually own tokens, we have to buy it off the market just like everyone else, and that's very important because um, right, to your point on, like, where it goes from a governance perspective, I think today you have people like us that are going to be stewards of this organization, making sure that we're pushing things forward. However, you absolutely better believe that structure is super important, right? Where we will ensure that the community has governance and we have a structure almost like, right, the democracy of America, where your people can actually propose things, they can vote on things, then there's actually a structure where, those things that are approved are executed on their behalf, right? Through the actual community itself. And so that absolutely is where we're going. And I mean, the easiest way I can think about that is today, right? If like the American Red Cross had a similar mechanic to this, where they had millions of people that had ownership in this. Potentially it changes the governance on like who's getting a heart. like literally, right? And I say that right when I as I say that out loud, it's like it can be a scary thing, but at the same time, right? If you have the right structure, you get rid of a lot of the issues and friction that are in the current system of today, and the right people potentially get a heart. The right people get the funding, right? All these things, and it's just more optimized for better impact.
I guess when you talk to nonprofits or just talk to potential big token buyers, let's say, we is the pushback ever, well, why don't I just donate to the nonprofit like directly? Like what do we need an EAT token for? Why do we need the wide exchange? How do you push back on that?
No, it's actually a good question. I actually don't think it's a pushback. Like that's not
Yeah,
our market.
probably a bad term. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's just not our market. Like we're actually not competing with people that want a tax write off, right?
Mhm.
We're
Yep.
we're competing with people that are buying Dogecoin, right?
Yep.
And I think it's very interesting because you said something just a second ago, and it was how do I think about the events that lead to growth in the token, and so how we think about it today, like Dogecoin doesn't have like a quarterly earnings report. Like if you think of like Nike does though, like so Apple,
Yeah.
Nike, right? They have a quarterly earnings report. They have a 10K, right? They have all the things that are actually instrumental in bringing more energy to that market. And so the way that we think about this is like today in the marketplace, there are tokens that are narrative only based tokens that have
Yeah.
no beat after the fact. And so, you get a Jake Paul that comes into a token and boom, right? Skyrockets. But that news dies, right? You can't do anything with that news after that. And so what's happening after that? If you think about what we're building here, it's reacting much more like a traditional market. And so rather than an earnings report, though, we're going to have impact reports. And so every quarter, we're working with these nonprofits to say, all right, how many people do we actually impact this quarter, which obviously is directly attributable to the traders of say EAT token. And that produces right a energy and a heartbeat to the token where there's always consistent flow coming in, which is going to bring in more traders, more participants, more nonprofits, right? All of the things in a sustainable way versus a narrative based novelty of, oh, hey, look at me. And right, it dies out next week. And you're sitting there waiting for the next Kim Kardashian or the next so forth to come in for an indication to trade this thing.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of like a natural disaster, token, right? Like EAT is obviously in hunger. Maybe there's like build or something as a token for like natural disasters. Those things come in waves.
Yes.
So you might have, where the token kind of stays a bit, you know, dormant or just,
Yep.
for 8 months out of the year, but hurricane season comes,
Yep.
and suddenly there's more activity in that token because there is more need for it at that moment in time. And so that's interesting because that it kind of goes back to like that vibe sort of emotion of what tokens present in a way where like Doge just trades off of like emotion and vibes and marketing and viral stuff. And a lot of that meme coin does that. This is similar to a way, but like with like real world issues. It's like you don't need to do any marketing because like natural disasters happen.
Right.
And it's like that stuff is kind of persistent. And so I'm just trying I'm talking a lot a little bit about how I'm trying to think about all this.
Now, Grant,
But
you've been listening in on our conversation or something because yeah, I mean, you nailed it. Like, if you think about the speculation of like hurricane season coming, when and we absolutely will have more of a natural disaster type initiative. You get traders now that are literally trading in a time zone, knowing that potentially some disasters coming and it will need to help. Very interesting, right? Just very interesting
Mhm.
because to your point, for Dogecoin and like all these things, they do the same thing, just
Yep.
it's for a different vibe, for a
Yep.
different reason.
It might be
Now
a comedy thing or like
right,
yeah, yeah, totally,
right,
totally.
right.
And there's an interesting thing with EAT. Obviously that's the first one we're doing. We see a big market size there. We see a lot of
Sure.
news. Snap just happened.
Yeah.
There's a lot of buzz. Thanksgiving just happened, right? We still have the holiday season. There's a lot of impact that we can have. The reason we're looking at this from a decentralized organization where the token holders, let's just say 4 years down the line, right? 4 years down the line is completely decentralized. There's a million or even a billion people that own this thing. Let's just say
Mhm.
that, take it down the road. And actually, there's a lot of funding that they get to direct where they want. Let that be nonprofits, let that be, they might get applications of people that actually need like $10 for a meal. I don't know what that is, right?
Right.
But then a natural disaster hits. This one's huge. And they say, you know what? We want to help them too. And they can, because they would, it's just a vote, right? And we want to impact them, and we want to impact that hunger initiative that actually is from the natural there's actually a lot of food that needs to be, especially if you look at what happened in North Carolina, Asheville,
Yeah.
there was a lot of food that needed to be delivered there, and they could do that. And that's what's really interesting, because if you just set it and forget it and it's just this token and, like, let's just say Doge, and there's no actual governance, then who's actually controlling that? And, like, what is, Martin said it, but what is the heartbeat on this thing? Like, this thing is it's a living, breathing, almost organism that it's the input and the feedback of not only the holders, but then the volunteers, the actual nonprofits. Let's say we solve hunger. Like, this could solve hunger. That would be the assumption. Like, it's not it's not like the craziest thing to assume that that would happen. What's it do then? Right? And
Mhm. Yeah.
that's what we think about more. When hunger is solved, what's the next thing that it's actually doing? And this community.
Yeah, and it's also super interesting to think about because it's sort of it also allows, like, in theory, governments to actually save money, or it could turn into the subsidy that the government does and not have to then subsidize perhaps as much. Obviously, SNAP is a food benefit. Farmers get a lot of subsidies, but there's subsidies across every economic scale in America and obviously around the world. That's the one thing we haven't touched on yet. Is the decentralization allows global input. So that's the power in this too. Is that you could you could have a pet shelter in Arizona be supported by somebody in France, right? I'm just
Right.
as an example,
Right.
but that's part of this is where traditional, exchanges are very localized. Foreign really can't trade on an ISE like normal people, but that's why stable coins are to me a big deal. And
Right.
these other decentralized exchanges, they involve everybody. And so
Yep.
that's the thing I think we can talk about maybe more is just the global aspect of it.
I think you're right on, and, going to your prior point, right, around, like, the difference between donating and what this is,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I think a lot of these nonprofits are also excited by because today, a lot of times, all they have is, "Is it Q4 yet?" And,
Mhm.
it's tax season, right? Like, I need my tax write-off, and that's why I'm investing, which I'm sure that people are donating because it's
Not investing, donating.
donating, sorry. I'm sure that people are donating because it is good, right? Like, that's true, but also, right, it's the tax benefit, right, that a lot of these, like, foundations and people are getting versus, right, this is kind of a different lens of looking at it where you no longer need to donate proper for the tax purpose if you don't need that. You can actually more proper invest in this initiative where it actually holds and maintains a value. I think what's really interesting, we were talking to a family office and they were actually telling us that this is interesting for them because there are times when they don't want to donate, but they still do want to, drive towards a cause where they would actually purchase this vehicle and hold it for like 5 years and then donate the value once, that appreciates 5 years from now to get that tax write-off, which is a really interesting we didn't even, right, think of that. It was like, "Oh, that's
Mhm.
a really interesting idea," um, that I think makes a lot of sense as well, and it's literally a different instrument than donating, but can really accomplish some of the same things that they're looking to do and help a lot of people.
I'll end on a couple questions here. We talked about the December 10th sort of small launch, kind of testing launch type of thing. What does success look like maybe, um, within the next like 6 to 12 months? Obviously, bringing out the first token, maybe getting nonprofits on board. Are there other like success metric or goals that you guys want to hit? Doesn't even have to be numbers wise. It could just be, whether it's internal in the organization. But I guess what are some of the goals and successes you think about?
Yeah. So from a innovation dev point of view, there's a couple things that we are not going to be able to launch with, but we know is like right around the corner that we're pretty excited about. One of those things is we have partnered with, I won't name the actual name, but it's adjacent to DoorDash. And so that's exciting. because basically, right? Yes, a part of this is for the causes, but we also think a lot about strategy, structure, people, and how we don't make this a novelty. We really want to make it, economy, right? Where people come and they actually can do things and thrive and be excited about it. And so just like a portion is going to causes, actually a portion is redirected back to the community. And so one of the first initiatives that we actually will be going live with in Q1 that actually aligns with Eat Token on this platform that's adjacent to DoorDash. The traders are actually getting subsidy themselves on this platform to be able to purchase food. And so we have a whole right model for what
Hmm.
that looks like. And so in that way, right, it's why do we do that, right? Because
Mhm.
think that there's so number one, we think about opportunity cost a lot. And the opportunity cost right now for both the causes and the nonprofits is very optimized towards complete upside, because if you think about like we're not asking any nonprofit for any financial anything on the front end. The cause itself, right? It's pure benefit for impacting that initiative where they just simply wouldn't have had it before, right? Again, new market, right? It's not donating. It's a source of impact and money from a completely different initiative. And so in this model, right, if we really want to do this the right way, we also have to think about what is it that enables us to get to 1 billion people into these actual initiatives as far as like participation in trading. And it's just true that like people it's a lot of people are what is in it for me, right? And so it's
Yep.
very interesting because you can use that to your advantage for the causes, right? It's okay, well, now I can trade this and I get benefit, but and you really feel good because you're actually in this community that just helped, right? A lot of people get fed, right? And all that. And so I think that's number one. That will be a really big lift if we once we execute on that in Q1. I think the other thing that's really interesting, you mentioned the whole global aspect to this. Uh, we've been getting a lot of people coming to our doorstep from Nigeria right now, and it's actually really interesting because we're not actively marketing to them at all, but yet there's something that's resonating, right? There's
They're
something
super crypto native in
super, yeah,
Nigeria.
and they're coming in at big scale. And so I think that's another one that we're starting to really look at as a potential to your point as to now you have global participation in helping the agenda of US issues and also vice versa, right? We're going to do the same for the issues that they have as well, but those are some of those things that we're really excited about.
The last question I'll have is really around like we kind of talked about partnerships because it's like one of the most important things here is kind of getting a lot of partners on board. What has I guess the partnerships or the conversations been like with the crypto community? Because obviously I think they the most important here, whether it's the users or investors or the platforms themselves. Like, I guess what has conversations been like with the crypto community, whether it is Coinbase or Uniswap or any other, or if there's other wallets that you've talked to? Like, I guess what's the conversation been with the crypto ecosystem, and what's their feedback on this sort of idea and innovation?
So we're actually partnered with Farcaster. We're launching on Clink. So these are all obviously buzzwords, key terms, whatever, things that no one would necessarily know, but all of that's integrated with Coinbase and Base. The like Eat will be tradable on Coinbase from day one.
Yeah.
So that's all dandy. It's great. It's interest like crypto is really interesting because crypto they'll trade meme coins, but they're about value. Like
Yeah. Right.
there's this dichotomy in crypto where they just do some crazy things. But when it comes to like proper charity, they're funny because they're not necessarily about like they crypto gives to charity for sure. If you look at Giving Block, they've
Oh yeah.
done 2 billion
Absolutely.
to charity, and they're all about the things that are to them extremely meaningful. Longevity is a big one in crypto in general. If you look at like Vitalik and also education, girls who's code, that's a big one too. There's a lot there. When it comes to this though, I would say it's funny because it's kind of mixed because the model's really good. Like they love the model, they love the attention possibility, the potential that it can have, and the right people. If you talk about people that are running these exchanges and all that, beautiful thing. But when it comes down to it, there's also skeptics of, "Oh, sounds weird. You're actually doing something. Just launch a meme coin, bro." Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
why do you wanna do that? And so there's, like, for crypto, sometimes it's almost, like, too thoughtful
Yeah.
to be exactly what they're, used to, and so there's actually, like, an education as well that, you know, the increasing transparency, when it comes to the whole thing around NGOs, there's a huge pushback today around NGOs. There's not enough transparency in NGOs. Crypto's
Yeah,
all
sure.
about transparency.
It's
And so
it's trust for sure.
exactly. That's what we want to bring to that entire space. More transparency, more trust, and that's what blockchain does. And so there is something to say about that. And, I think for them, it also comes down to trust. And I say good for them, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot there that that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Yeah,
I
and
mean yeah.
I'll just add a little bit too. It's funny, just funny story on the transparency angle, and this is more, I think, for the your nonprofit audience. I think we've felt this firsthand in crypto, where early on we actually hired a developer. This is like 5 years ago, right? And we were getting something built, and we sent some funds, and the developer came back and said, "Hey, I never received the money." And we're like, "What do you mean? Like, we just sent, these funds, and what's going on?" And so obviously we sent it through crypto, and we're like, "Oh, we we can see exactly where it went, right?" We pulled up our Explorer page, we pulled up the wallet, right? We saw the transaction, and we literally said, "Oh, is this your wallet?" He said, "Yes." And it was like, "Oh, sorry, I didn't see that there," right?
Yeah.
And so that's super important because I think we use this term transparency a lot. And I don't think people really understand it. I think, right, it's just 'cause this kind of buzzword that's like, oh, yeah, like crypto's transparent. But like when you actually feel what that means, which means, we just sent something to this person and that's truth and that's what happened. And anyone in the world can actually verify that those funds were sent to the right or wrong place. That's super right important for the nonprofit industry as it is. Politics and there's probably a plethora of
Yep.
other industries, right, where that's important. And so I say that right to just say like I think a part of the crypto audience, they're looking at what we're doing and saying finally a use case where it actually matters so that people can look at it and be like, "Oh, I understand why we should be using crypto." And so we're getting a lot of people that like that aspect, right, in the crypto native ecosystem, because they know that what we're doing will actually help the adoption curve of the entire industry.
Amazing, fellas. This has been a great education experience for me. I know it's really hard to build what you guys are building. So usually when you start things, right, you usually end up building not what you expected to build. And it sounds like that's sort of the path that maybe you started down 5 years ago, and then all of a sudden, AI comes along, crypto gets policy around it, stable coins come up, there's a little bit more trust now. You can now kind of build maybe unintentionally something that is way more impactful than what you originally even thought about. So, congrats on the journey so far and best of luck for the next decade to come.